You're gonna want to stick around to the end this time. I promise. Max 80s.
Don't move! You're all under arrest! Oh, shit.
Crusher Jones here, and welcome to Bullet Ballet, where we discuss media of the present, past, and the future. This time I'm going back to the 80s to talk about Appleseed, a 1988 original video animation based off a manga by illustrator Masamune Shirow, who was once the man, M-A-N, as far as Japanese comics went. The real cutting-edge, go-to, finger-on-the-button, not kids stuff guy. So this means you should start your timers right now so you can figure out just how long it takes me to use the term horse porn, because that's what he draws now. Horse porn. Masamune Shirow was a prominent presence in the early American manga market. This was in large part because of the efforts of Torrance Smith and Studio Proteus, who endeavored to bring Shirow's efforts to the American and North American market. Anyway, Shirow's illustrations were super impressive, heavily shaded, filled with guns, girls, and mecha, and he was pretty much totally obsessed with all of them. It was a real grab the ball and run with it as far as you could possibly go take on the Cyberpunk jam, and even though a lot of his works featured as many footnotes as your average political science dissertation, they were still rather imaginative and unique as far as their construction and world building, etc., etc. A lot of anime producers tried to adapt Shirow's work. However, in part due to the often bewitching levels of detail in his illustrations, Masamune Shirow's manga to anime conversion success ratio is actually pretty meh. But people kept taking swings at adapting his ideas, some to far greater effect than others. Accepting Black Magic M66, which Shirow himself directed and is damn well worthy of your time, and some really forgettable Shirow-related, if not Shirow-derived projects that tried to capitalize on his name like Gundress, which is just one of the worst fucking things I've ever seen, you've still got Ghost in the Shell, a couple versions of Dominion Tank Police, and Appleseed, which has 3 CGI feature films and a TV series as well as an OVA to its name. This video is about the OVA from 1988, which most fans of my vintage remember with a big old sigh. And there's a bunch of reasons why. First off, basically we all got baited and switched. This thing had the coolest packaging you could imagine. To this day I think the original box, not the cover art, but the box, which was a marketing coup. Black with red embossment and a gray clamshell. Oh my goodness, I had to have it. Then I watched the video itself and I wondered if it was the right tape. I mean, I saw the box, it's not any of that. Where the hell's the non-stop automated death and mechanized destruction? What the fuck? And you gotta admit, it's pretty cool from what I've shown you here, but that's because I've cut the best parts of it for you. The real bonus is at the end of the episode. Sure, it hints at all this great post-nuclear destruction. I mean, cut to the goddamn car chase, people, please. But even David Keith Riddick from US Renditions, who put it out in the States, recalled at a panel that there was a feeling of, Gainax did this? This is Appleseed? Among the staff. You're expecting some Mad Max Death Wish 3 post-nuclear cyberpunk slayfest filled with bullpup stocks and clip dumps, and you get a utopian police procedural. Okay. Appleseed is the story of Dunin and Buriaros. God, I'm gonna mispronounce that all the time, so get used to it. She being an intense, take-no-shit ESWAT officer, and he a mysterious, gruff-but-wise cyborg cop, hunting down traitorous pig Colin Mathlos, see what I did there, and his co-conspirator, the freelance terrorist AJ Sebastian, who has come to the utopian town of Olympus to challenge the genetically engineered bioroid's domination over humankind in the post-nuclear age and the supercomputer Gaia's control of the city. It's a cat-and-mouse game, wherein one group is playing off the other, and all of them are distrustful of each other. Add in power armor, gunfights, and a big-ass tank, and there you are. And despite how promising this seems on paper, it's just a big-ass mess. In terms of what unfolds, Appleseed is really bothersome. The plot moves forward, but the story never really holds water. In short, the motivations here are not worth a rat's ass. As you watch it, and you see the world unfold, you can't help but wonder why anybody would bother doing any of this. Seriously, why? For instance, the feature player bad guy, AJ Sebastian, you can never figure out why he's there. Is it just money? Is he a sadist? Does he really give a damn about any of this? I don't want to spoil too much, but even aspects which no terrorist sympathizer cop would tolerate are shrugged off with a, yeah, whatevs. Even the keen Shirow gunplay realism that plagues his comics, in the best way, doesn't happen. In one shot, there's a very telling continuity slip. A finger backs off a trigger after a warning from a very antagonistic Dunin, only to find itself there less than a second later, setting up a pretty decent action scene. And again, motivations just never connect. Callan's all over the place on this place is a zoo, everyday conflicts are denied us shit. And yes, he's very scarred because his wife killed herself, but perspective is everything here, and it doesn't quite carry over. Meanwhile, the OVA opens with everybody shooting up an office. Doesn't that help compensate for the denial? And if Olympus having an 80% bioroid population is the key problem, then go live in the desert. There's all those rats and scorpions and shit. They'd love to have you. In the words of a creepy guy who consulted for us at work, yet always stood too close to me in the bathroom and who I caught stealing from us,
you could always quit.
This just seems difficult to relate to, which may be part of the story and could be used as a catalyst to crystallize the alienation some of the characters feel, but you have to mobilize that alienation and make it relatable to people outside the narrative. Even if they don't or can't embrace it, they should be able to relate to it. Understanding is not sympathizing. Maybe quarantine's making me crazy, but hell, I'd rather not have to tell people at the grocery store, I work in an autopsy lab, get away from me, and go about my day and deal with being bored than moan about feeling unfulfilled because nobody on the bus wants to punch me in the face for smudging their sneaker or some shit. Sorry you feel like you need adventure all the time, everybody. Don't steal a spider tank or anything. The Appleseed Ova is not Appleseed the comic, which is a dense political thriller with goofy asides and some sick shootouts. But if the adaptation was designed to bring out the nuance and complexity of the characters and make us care more for them instead of giving us a brusque killing and thrilling experience, that would be one thing. But honestly, they're just sort of there and going through the motions. Duden and Bree are cartoon characters in the flat, two-dimensional pejorative sense of the term, with Bree occasionally leaning in to provide some caring, considerate advice, and Duden showing all the focus and restraint you'd expect from a child throwing a tantrum over being denied an extra-large whatever. Palin is so emo and cryptic that I can remember preteen me thinking, wow, that guy's cool and traumatized, so all the alarms as far as douche chills are going off right now. And I'm fairly sure he would have stuck out as somewhat conspicuous to his buddies at police headquarters as being questionable. Meanwhile, Athena, Olympus's big dog politician, who recruits Duden and Bree to act in her investigation of all of this, may as well be twiddling her thumbs in every scene she's in and then adjusting her monocle. Everybody is telegraphing everything here. There's no nuance. You can also forget about any real dive into character history outside of Callan, who's pretty much a plot device with a larynx. But to be fair, the lovable Toshio Furukawa's voice acting really makes him more memorable than he should be. God, there's a voice actor who can really class up a joint, even when he's got nothing to work with. It's one thing to have a dumb character in a clever story. That's actually an interesting world-building device because it introduces tension, limits, and challenges. But sitting down to rewatch this OVA, which for years was my throw it on forget it thing, I've come to realize this isn't a smart movie about dumb cops and a clever terrorist. This is just a dumb OVA. Let's go deep and look at the beginning of the flick. AJ Sebastian and his terrorist cohort, who he intentionally distances himself from because people skills, have taken over an office. Sebastian notices a police helicopter flying over, implying that it landed on the roof earlier. That's actually pretty good storytelling. It's a cool implied thing. It covers a lot of ground in seconds. And then the whole sequence goes to hell. AJ waltzes off, gets himself arrested, leaves his compatriots to die, and then breaks his handcuffs after already being searched, which means that they missed his cybernetic limbs which he used to break the handcuffs, while being held in a raid zone, which is kind of goofy because it's a raid zone and you'd think there would be people busy on a raid. Then he just waltzes out the back and kills 2 more cops, but not before he leaves a booby trap since he apparently had a grenade, tape, and tripwire handy. Huh? This is where you notice the script is making you work to think somebody is smart instead of actually having them be smart. Duden and Bree make this personal and go after Sebastian. Bree says he really pulled a fast one, but the building was surrounded. How could he have done that? It's Malcolm in the Middle syndrome. Just keep insisting that guy's smart instead of showing or proving it. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat as far as narrative goes, and I don't think media makers should be held to first-year film school cliches, but come on, this is supposed to be a smart thriller here. At this point you should realize that Duden and Bree are piss-poor detectives, which means that this is going to be a piss-poor detective story. What's worse than the motivations being trash? The greater societal narrative just doesn't add up. The proposed solution to Olympus's problems are big-ass tanks. Screwing your way back to virginity, huh? And stealing the one prototype with manual controls, it's just a big-ass floating target. They set up a story angle about an outside force coming to retrieve it, but it goes nowhere, much like this movie itself. It's all just dust in the wind. And don't even get me started on the whole stolen DNA bit. I actually wrote it all out to make some degree of sense, and that's when I realized it didn't make sense. Apparently taking this information about Hitomi, one character, and then reintroducing it back to the computer system that had it in the first place is what makes Olympus shut down. That's like somebody stealing my car and then me getting it back, and then refusing to drive into work the next day. And the solution to everything is so dumb I'm not even going to bother talking about it. And of course it involves shooting something, because that's how you do everything in an advanced cyberpunk thriller, right? You shoot something. And while I've puked all over this OVA for a minute now, I should clarify why I still consider myself a fan. Nostalgia's a hell of a drug, and I gotta admit, I dig this era of animation a lot. AIC's work during and around this period is some of my favorite stuff, and it totally got me into Japanese animation. And I have fond memories of that time in the medium and what their work brought to it. Being real, Appleseed's not all bad. The animation isn't stellar, and it barely hints at the brilliance of Shirow at his best, but it's competent and in many cases pretty striking. There are some really good mechanical designs in it. In fact, watch any scenes with mecha or power armor in them, and note the higher quality and the attention to detail, because they really do stand out. And as disappointing as the Big Show spider tank is, the landmates more than make up for it. They're well designed, believable, and used to great effect, especially in the Tartarus raid shootout scenes. Kazuyoshi Katayama's direction's pretty strong here, and he builds up the world quite well. Oddly enough, this is why the larger story container seems so goofy, because it doesn't seem to jibe and coalesce with the world you see before you. By the way, Katayama later went on to work on an actual main character less smart than the story is show with Big O, which I highly recommend. Katayama's direction elevates the material in a lot of ways. He uses surprise cuts well, he employs off-screen sound well, and uses cues and transitions in an interesting way, and it moves the story forward and keeps you wrapped up in it, despite the story, sucking the bag. He does a great job hinting at things and making certain implications stand out, as I've mentioned, which makes you wonder what happened. It's just, when you unravel what happened, it's kind of, At 70 some odd minutes, Appleseed doesn't feel short, but it's not particularly long either. A lot of that has to do with the soundtrack, which rules. The closing track, Crystal Celebration, rips, and a lot of the evocative stuff here does a lot to prefigure the later future funk movement that's now pretty much outlasted the music and the era that inspired it. To that end, I'm really getting kind of a Miami Vice vibe here, as far as the police procedural goes. And really, I don't think that's a bad reference point. A lot of the show's episodes were disposable and questionable in terms of plot and story, but got by because of aesthetics and interesting creative choices that kept you from thinking about the story too much. And thank God they did. Speaking of aesthetics, the design of Olympus feels fleshed out and comprehensive, and you sort of get the feeling you know what life would be like there. In fact, if I had to choose a single word to describe why I like the show, it would be design. Appleseed jives with my taste in architecture, consumer products, technology, and the like. That usually manifests itself in small details. Check out the guns like the H&K submachine guns and what were then cutting-edge Glocks. It seemed like they were part of a, does this work in this world set of choices? And I dig those kind of conversations. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't make for a great storytelling experience all the way around, and it's not something I could recommend to people unless they have a thing for that particular era of design. It's a fast 70 minutes and the little details are appealing, but again, it just doesn't substantiate the production of an entire short OVA. So yeah, Appleseed does not really stand up on its own. It's very much a qualified watch. And with Shirow now making horse porn, it's doubtful we'll ever get more of the comics, but there are crappier choices out there. But you could do better, too. For instance, the live-action trailer they did for this fucker, it's way more intriguing than it has any right to be. Even if it still seems like they just found a model and went, hey, let's run a camera for the afternoon and shoot these cosplayers. Plus, by the way, shooting an Uzi right in front of somebody's face is ill-advised. Cyborg or no. Those things are loud and, they're guns. But yeah, I would have watched it if it was a full movie, too. And I would have referenced horse porn as I did so. So that's it for this jaunt down Bullet Ballet lane. Be sure and like and subscribe, ring my bell LL, and throw in a few comments. I'd like to thank Jeremy Blake for the use of his tune A Rising Wave for the intro jam, and I hope you stick around for the next video. Have a good one, take care of yourself. Horse porn!